Okay, thank you so much. So I am trained in anthropology. I'm still in progress, but thank you so much, Raymond, for this opportunity to talk. And thank you so much for this place, Dancing Penguin, for giving us space today. Okay, so my talk today is Love and War in Sri Lanka. I will read from my field notes so that you can feel what went there. So Sri Lanka is right below India, a small island today about 2.4 million population. The languages spoken in Sri Lanka, if you don't know, it's the majority, about 70% is Sinhalese, then the rest Tamil. Maybe, sorry, it's not seven, yeah, it's around. And other languages. The Tamil-speaking people are Hindus, Muslims, and a little bit Christians. Sinhalese, majority of them are Buddhist. So the religious identification is the Buddhist, about 70% Buddhism, 15% Hindus, 7.6 Muslims and the Christians. So the Buddhists are Sinhalese, Hindus are Tamils, Muslims, they call themselves Muslims as an individual separate group, racial group, than Tamils or Sinhalese. Christians include both Sinhalese and Tamils. And the areas that Tamil language is spoken is where it is highlighted in the darker colors. So the northern part and eastern part of Sri Lanka. And I just wanted you to get the historical background. This is what I could bring. So Sri Lanka's ethnic conflict, it's 1948 independence from the United Kingdom. 1956 is an important year. That is the year when Sinhala language is decided to be the official language of the country, which means all the legal documents will be Sinhalese. Before it was in English. So the university will be the medium of education, entrance examination, police documents, land documents, car plates, traffic signs will be in Sinhalese, no longer in English. So this was a very big thing for the Tamil people because it meant for them kind of blockage to proceed with society. There were, hi.
Previously, so what English was the common language, was that spoken?
No, there were 3 languages, yeah. But so the riots was there following this 1956 introduction of Sinhalese as the official language, not by the Tamil people, but by right-wing Buddhist monks who said, this is not enough. We want Buddhism. Not only Sinhalese language, but we want Buddhism as the national religion. Early 1970s, there were militant Tamil youth groups forming in the Tamil-speaking areas because they realized they cannot proceed with life if their education, especially university education, is blocked. There were communist youth movements in the south. The majority Sinhalese youth, they realized the way in which the country is going, even when they get good education, there won't be any job. So there was joblessness. So for example, this is the South, communist youth movements in the South, April 1971 insurgency. And this was with the very big state oppression of the terminating these movements by the youth. In the north, there were, this is just one of the militant Tamil youth groups, Liberation Tigers of Tamil Eelam. Have you ever heard of it? Tigers, the LTTE. Yes. They remained after 1986 as the single most powerful youth group, the militant youth group. But in the 70s and early 80s, there were multiple, really like more than dozens of different Tamil youth groups. But this group really physically terminated all other groups with the military overpowered, and then they became the single dominant group. Okay, so the Sri Lanka's ethnic conflict, another important thing is 1972, there was new constitution. Ceylon was the name until then, but from then on it became Sri Lanka. sacred Lanka Island, which really sounds Sanskrit, Sinhalese, Aryan, whereas the Tamil is considered Dravidian, a different group. So, and Buddhism did not become the national religion, but was given the foremost place. And there were colonization of the Tamil-speaking areas by the Sinhalese, quote-unquote, farmers, but who actually were sent were the prisoners to colonize the Tamil-speaking areas. Then this quota system meant proportionate to the population, there should be proportionate percentage represented in the university, for example. If there's only 24% Tamil-speaking people in the whole nation, there should be only 24% of Tamil-speaking students at the university, which is a very, very difficult thing for Tamil people because British during the colonial period preferred the Tamils, like Tutsis and Hutsi conflict in Rwanda. And the similar thing they did, the British preferred Tutsi. In Sri Lanka, British preferred Tamils. So actually at the university there were a lot of Tamil students, but from 1972 onwards, 1973 quota system, only 24% Tamils or whatever the percentage. 1977 is a very important year for Sri Lanka. That's when Sri Lankan market is opened up for IMF, World Bank, JICA, all the international aids almost fully. So economic liberalization. And then there was a change in the ruling party, and then the Tamil party became the opposition party, and that was really not okay for majority of Sinhalese people. Then the riot. 1983, the Black July is remembered all over in Tamil diaspora today as the day of the pogrom of the Tamil people. Thousands of the Tamil people were killed in all over Sri Lanka, but also mainly in Colombo. Lots of Tamil people fled from the main city, Colombo, to north, the Tamil-speaking north, hoping that they can find refuge there. But anyway, so the Black July. Okay, so myself, I am Japanese, and for today's talk is about my field work. And my field work happened to be in the midst of the very last phase of Sri Lanka's civil war. So 2006, 2007, 2009, 2010, a total of 2.5 years. I happened to be there as a doctoral student. Nobody really knew that the war is going to end this way. I never knew, people around me never knew, the funding agencies, the university never knew, but it just happened to be when I was there, the war ended in a terrible, terrible way. Field sites, I used to have the Tamil Catholic camp, which is the very top in the north, the pen mark. Then the Muslim refugee camp in the middle. Then the Sinhala Catholic village in the bottom, the blue dot, purple dots. That's where I stayed. Today's talk is about the very north, right by the war zone, what I've recorded. So conducting field work in the midst of war is pretty much situation is, I don't know how you find in this, what you find in this picture, but this picture from the Kokkyo Naki Ishidan, the medicines without front, doctors without MSF, fits my understanding of the atmosphere I was in. Basically, this is the Tamil school, Sinhala army, guarding. Everywhere we go, there's army or police checking IDs. And it's all male gaze and like a feminized, the weaker party. This really describes like the very tense situation where things have been. Anyway, so the final phase of Sri Lanka's civil war, which ended in May 18, 2009, is something like this. I was here on this small island called Manna. The red line, the red arrows is where my people fled. I did not move with them. I stayed on the other side on the island. But they fled almost 2.5 years it took them from the beginning of the red arrow to get to the last red arrow, which is Mulativ. 1 in 4 civilians were killed or went unaccounted for. Tens of thousands got injured. There were about 400,000 people living in this area under the Liberation Tigers of Tamil Nadu, under the Tigers, under the LTT rule. LTT had their own military, police, governments, banks, agricultural society, everything. It was like a small state. But so there were about 400,000 people remaining with them. Then in 2.5 years, the population, those who survived was only 300,000 people. So 100,000 people went either dead or missing or unaccounted for. That's why I said 1 in 4 civilians killed or unaccounted for. This is pretty much the image. They first thought, they had cars and they carried whatever things they thought they would need. With the time goes, it became only the dresses that they are wearing and whatever the meager things that they had. This is where the army came in. In the end, it was only very tiny land in Mulativ that people were fleeing into, and the Sri Lankan government called no fire zone, civilian safe zone, civilian safe zone. But that was where the government was dropping the bombs. That was where the LTT was forcing people to move. LTT never allowed anybody to flee, get out. So whoever fled toward the government, LTT would shoot from behind. So the only people who were allowed to flee from the war zone was the severely wounded. So during that time, for example, April 2009, 1 month before the end of the war, I heard people say, like, I'm afraid that the entire Tamil race will be extinct. That much people thought it's the end. They are just bombing everybody. But some were able to flee. The government approached and the people fled. LTT shooting from behind. The government also doing all kinds of nasty things to women and whoever they suspected was the guerrilla. But once they fled, we thought they will come to us or come to their own village. But they were all interned in what called transit camps. and this is literally how they looked. We were not allowed to go in except meeting them sometime, but coming out. Then they were all kept here for about May. It ended. The May 2009 war ended, and only early December 2009 that year, 6 months they were kept here. So there are. That's how I.
Counting down.
Oh, I have 6 minutes. Okay, so this is the illustration from Nishan Sanjay, who was 15 years old when he was fleeing, recounting his experience. Okay, so maybe I should read. I have only 6 minutes. So what I wanted to read is, okay, so this is one of the story that I heard in around March of what happened in January 2009. This was still war is going on. This is almost right after the government set up so-called no-fire zone. This is happening inside no-fire zone. Okay, it was on January 26, 2009 at Sidamdirapuram in Mulativ in the LTT territory. K, his wife Emma, their baby, and K's mother, his brother, and the brother's family, and his sister, and the sister's family were all seeking shelter under a tree. It was at 6 a.m. Emma was preparing tea, K was cutting firewood, and was therefore standing a short distance from everybody else. Suddenly he saw a shell the rocket, the bomb, fly in and explode right at the place where his family members were gathering. The shrapnel set free a shower of fragments that hit his wife, his baby, his mother, his brother, the brother's son, his sister, and her husband and their children, 9 people by one shell. Kay rushed to his family. He first found his mother, who was on her way to get her share of tea and was hit by the shrapnel. She was on the ground with her grandson, the baby, bent forward and was breathing heavily. Under her stomach, Kay found the baby crying with blood gushing from his legs. He took the child and tried to lift his mother also, but in that instant, mother died in his arms. He then placed the mother on the ground and lifted his child and rushed to his wife and found that the back of her neck was cut open, but she was still breathing. He put the crying child on the ground and tried to lift his wife, but her head was about to fall off. She told him, "Take me to Manor. Take me to Manor." "Sure, I shall take you," Kay replied. Manor was 70 miles away from where they were. In Manor, there was their village, from where they had fled a year and a half earlier. In Manor, there were Emma's parents. And sorry. When Emma heard the baby cry, however, she said, "Is the baby all right? Is he hurt? Don't worry about me, please take the baby." So Kay put his wife on the ground and again lifted the child who was bleeding seriously and brought him to his wife. my dear baby," she said. She reached her hand to touch the baby's small knee, and then she died. Kay placed her on the ground and was about to lift the baby again when he found his brother scarcely breathing. When Kay approached him, he died. Quote, "Just like that, one after the other, they all died." Unquote. Then he heard the dead brother's son crying out, "Uncle, give me water, give me water." He turned his face to where the voice was from and saw the child with his body cut in 2 pieces. There was no water to give him. While carrying his son in the one arm and Kay lifted his brother's son in the other, he stood there not knowing what to do. Soon the legs of his brother's son had spasm and the child died. A stranger was standing nearby. Kay asked him to help dig a grave for 8 people after burying them. Kay ran for hospital carrying his son. Quote, "The shock of seeing all my loved ones die like that would have been enough to kill me. It was for my baby that I left them all behind in that foreign place and came. Hereafter, I'm not going to tell anyone about what happened that day. If somebody were to force me to tell what happened that day, I warn you, I'd go mad." Over. Keep going. Sure. So I interviewed, this was right after, 4 days after the death of everyone, he narrated this to a priest. So I got this from that priest. Then in November 2009, this is 10 months after everybody died, I had a personal interview with Kumar, with Kay. So I interviewed Kay. I was very nervous. I explained to him, I was not going to use your name or anybody's names. Then he said, looking at me with a pause and said, "Yeah, go ahead and use my name. Indeed, use my wife's name." He said, then he said, "Now ask." He said gently. And I said, "Well, okay, would you mind telling me what happened on January 26, 2009? Oh, well, no, I'll tell you," he said. He said, "We were in a village near Perunkalipat Mulativ. It was only 2 days after we had come to that village. It was at 6:46 a.m. when the shell fell and blasted. My wife was preparing tea. The tea was almost ready, so she called my mother to bring the baby to her because the baby was hungry. She wanted to breastfeed him. Mother stood up, held the baby in her arms, and began walking towards my wife. At that instant, the shell fell. I rushed to mother. She was about to die, but I thought that the baby was not hurt because mother was shielding from him with her upper body. So I lifted the baby. Then I found that one of his legs was cut open. Then he narrates, but he doesn't narrate anything about his wife or his wife's death. So within 2 minutes, Kay finished. I was expecting that the interview would take longer and he would tell me in detail about his experience. Based on that assumption, I had arranged this meeting. But that was all that he spoke about what happened that day. He did not even mention his wife's death. We both remained silent. Does your wife appear in your dreams? I asked. Yes, he made a shy face and said, after I returned to Mana, I saw her 5 times in my dreams, and we talked about many things. Many things? Yes, many things. Then again, we both remained silent, and I did not want to ask further. And after some time, Kay said, recently I started drinking. The second, tears welled up in my eyes. Kay knew that I was now crying. I felt embarrassed. Kay was surprised. Why are you crying? But soon he added that now he knew me better. You are worried. You are worried. Kavalaipatich, he repeated. Now that he has seen my tears, I felt a huge relief. Hereafter, I was free to express my emotions. No longer any need to pretend on my part that I could conduct an interview, a scientific or objective, whatever that I was going to do, and because of which I was restricting myself not to show any emotions. So I began, I'm crying not because I feel sorry for you because you lost your family, but you are drinking. Why? Kay was even more surprised. It worries me because you have a long way to go in this life. But what can I do, he said. He was now talking to me as if I was his friend. So basically what he said is when he goes fishing, they are fishermen. Other fishermen knows about his story. So they don't know what to do with him. So they just give him drinks. That's all that they could do to him. So he became an alcoholic. And then he talks about the alcoholic problem. Anyway, so sorry, I went much beyond. So this was part of my field notes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Have some time for questions, so the floor is open. Go ahead.
Shanan? Yeah, first, thank you so much for the field research. And actually, went zero great respect to that. But my question is that what happened in 2009 or 2000 and something? What is the correlation of that between the rights movements or let's say things like that?
Between?
And what is the relation of the movements in 2000s and the things that happened last year?
In Sri Lanka?
Yeah,
Thank you
last
so
year
much for asking.
Financial crisis, everybody was going to their central bank doing whatever things. What is the correlation and what do you think of that?
It's a wonderful question. That is why I started with the history. What I wanted you all to see is it's actually the foreign forces and intervention, especially the money that comes from abroad in the name of development, that requires a lot of racial politics inside a small country like Sri Lanka. Because nobody is neutral. When you give money, the ruling party will have their interest how to spend that money. So in Sri Lanka's case, the money that came after the opening up of the economy was spent for big amount for colonization, sending the Sinhalese to the Tamil-speaking areas to settle, to change the population demography, so that when the next election comes, Tamil votes will be suppressed. So what you said is very important. So, and all these money politics that has brought Sri Lanka to ethnic conflict and war. And Sri Lanka's war actually was also beneficial to some people. Has brought Sri Lanka to this level. In 2008, the spending of
Don't touch your mic, please.
spending of Sri Lanka's government was so much on military, on defense. But European countries and US have already stopped aiding. So the big part came from Japan. And then the other countries like Eastern Europe. Lots of weapons came from Eastern Europe. But whatever it was so much spending, they needed quick money in 2008 to finish this war. So they basically was not able to borrow from reasonable reasonable banks, the organizations with reasonable interests. Like if they had borrowed from ODAs, it would have been like 0.9 interest rate. But instead they borrowed like 9.0 interest rate or something, like the really money that they had to pay back. So over the years, the 10 years, now it's more than that, 12 years after the war. All these years, they've been trying to repay, and borrowing, and they couldn't really borrow the money with less interest. So it has magnified, and it became, one of the reasons is, yes, military spending for the war, and there are other elements. But what you asked is so important. I really wanted to highlight that point.
Yeah, thank you so much. Like that military mechanism or whatever that might be is like so interesting at the economic standpoint and also in the social science standpoint. Thank you so much for answering that, because I was absolutely naive to that.
We gotta get other people.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, thank you so much.
You're
That's all.
welcome.
Other questions? We still have time.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Well, thank you so much for that. That was very insightful. I'm particularly curious about your interest originated. Why did you end up in Sri Lanka? What was the origin of this research for you?
I have written a book which I forgot to bring, and Ray says I should have brought.
You should have brought the book.
I have written.
It should be on your first.
I have written a book to answer your question, because I've been asked many times the question. So this is called Hareruya Mura no Ryoshi Tachi. In Japanese, I wrote. That is basically I'm explaining why I did what I did and ended up there. Yes.
Where can you buy it?
Amazon
Yeah,
is
I buy the book.
Amazon. Kyushu University bookstore maybe it's cheaper, but Amazon is fastest.
I think we got time for one or two more questions.
The hardest thing for me have been, since there were very few foreigners there, United Nations stayed only up until December 2008. The last 5 months, there were no international monitoring organization. Red Cross left in, I think, January, 1 month after the United Nations, because government was bombing the hospitals. So the Red Cross was only able to carry the wounded by ship from the war zone to the government territory. Once the wounded people came, the Doctors Without Borders would treat, but inside there were hardly anybody. So people I was with, they would assume that I would tell the truth, even though I wasn't fit at all, but they would think, you see, you write, you record, you witness. That was too much. That was so much that 10 years I didn't speak at all. It was just too much for me and for them, I'm sure. But now we are starting, like we are connecting. We want to talk about it. But this type of experience kind of blocks you a decade, maybe more, even to talk.
You had a question?
Oh, yeah.
This last one.
Curious. So, some of the militant rebel groups in the Tamil-speaking areas started in the 70s, but was that like an independent state for the whole time, or was it like a constant war? Or was there times where there were just like, I guess, Tamil
There was-
small nations?
There was never an independent state, but all these Tamil youth groups were aiming at an independent state, which they called, LTT called, Tigers called Tamil Elam, country, Tamil nation's land, the country for Tamils. All that they got in the 1990s, especially around that time, the LTT got till the end of the war, was a semi-autonomous state, to which, for example, Norwegian government would come and negotiate. And in 2002, there was actually a ceasefire with the Norwegian Scandinavian government negotiated peace accord, a ceasefire agreement. So, but not an independent state.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you
very
so
much.
much.